You can't keep a good podcast down. They tried to take us off the air. No, they didn't. We've just been busy. It's been a busy summer.
Holy cow, we are back. In a day that I almost wasn't sure was ever going to happen again. That's how it felt. We are back after
I really tried my hardest to make it happen that way, honestly. I kept being like, no, man. Honestly, it's funny. We were supposed to do this last week, and I'd been working so much, and I was so tired, and I was so burned out, and I hadn't slept much the night before. And then sure as shit, what happens this week? I get hit with COVID.
I know. The funny thing
And I was like, there's no world I'm going to tell us to push it back again because we were just too close to greatness. And we were this close to greatness. And I pulled back and I was like, all right, I guess we're going to do this. So if I start coughing, wheezing, passing out during the middle of this, you know why.
You just wanted to
see, kids, this is why you get vaccinated and get your boosters, because you can still function as a normal human being.
If you start getting to that point, just put one of the puppies on screen and we'll have some, we'll get ratings anyway.
Yeah, I mean, Mabel would just take up the screen and wander around and it'll be fine. You know, absolutely. She's way cuter than I am anyway.
Absolutely. It's funny. Like you mentioned that, like, I honestly, I didn't get COVID anything this week, but I slept not a wink last night. I went to bed like around 2 or 3 a.m. and I just like laid there the whole night. I'm like, what the fuck?
You're just thinking about how good I've been looking lately. I get it.
That must be what it is. Maybe I was just excited to watch The Killer this morning. I got to watch The Killer. I can't say anything about it, the new Killer. I can't say anything about it. So all I can say is I watched it, but 2 weeks we'll talk about it.
And, I just name dropping out here thinking he's so fucking cool now. Getting screeners.
Okay. Well, you know, that's just my role. That's how I roll. I have to put my name out there as being a big shot or something because that's what I do all the time. But
no, I mean, you are.
Oh, well, thank you, my friend. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was going to ask you. You kind of came up. I was going to ask you how you're feeling, but you get a chance to talk pre-game here. You got your liquids.
I'm surviving. The last 2 days have been the better side of the first half of this. I managed to avoid COVID that I'm aware of till this point, not for lack of testing in the past, but I've always come up negative. So I assumed that if I ever had it, I just was never. This was the first time since all this started that I've ever tested positive, and I felt like I got hit by a goddamn freight train. The very first day. Like, first 2 days were brutal. Just absolutely brutal.
As someone who had it twice, I definitely feel your pain and know exactly how that felt. Luckily, it's been a while since I've gotten it, luckily. So hopefully that'll be the last time I got it. But you never know at this point.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, you know, at this point, we just live with it. And, you know, I joked up top that this is why we get our vaccines and stuff, but like truthfully, I couldn't tell you how happy I am that I have it, because it could have just as easily bodied me so much worse if I didn't have that. And so I'm very glad that I have been thinking about that, you know, and still getting boosted when they recommend it and things like that, because I like being not sick generally, or at least being able to deal with said sick.
Right.
So that is a nice change of pace, but I did get a chance because I was in bed for so long. Honestly, I didn't leave the house for the first 3 days, and I stayed in bed for the first 2 and the couch the third. So I did finally migrate. I was able to move, but I ended up rewatching the first 2 seasons of Daredevil and all the Indiana Jones movies.
You watching all the Indiana Jones movies again? I'm shocked. Let me tell you.
I know. Hey, look, man, there's nothing more comforting than having the time of your life keeping up with the Joneses when you're feeling a little down and sick and claustrophobic and stuck inside, because those are a whole world of adventure out there.
Just putting Harrison Ford in a hat, give him a whip, you're good to go.
I mean, I'm a simple man. All right. That's all I'm saying. I'm a simple man. If Harrison Ford wears a hat in a movie, I'm probably watching it.
Absolutely. Let's be completely honest. If Harrison Ford's in a movie, I'm watching it. To be honest with you,
I mean, that's not wrong. 6 Days, 7 Nights, Hollywood Homicide. Watched them all.
Yep, absolutely.
You know, Firewall, was it? Firewall.
Yep, Firewall. That was their one. Yep, that's right. Even
Paul Bettany.
Paul Bettany. That's right. He was in that one. Actually, you know what? A low key John Harrison Ford movie I really enjoy. I don't think gets its due is What Lies Beneath. I like that one a lot too.
You really like that movie. I need to rewatch it again. It's funny. Yeah. Clark Gregg wrote that, number one. Yep. Agent Coulson himself wrote that movie. I saw it for the first time during the lockdowns. I had
Oh,
like never see it. I remember when it came out, and I didn't love it. I need to revisit it. I don't know if I went in with like weird expectations. Like I didn't think it was bad, but it never held my attention. The
interesting.
way that yeah, right, because it's a Zemeckis joint. I should 100% be in the bag for it.
And I kind of love that it like plays against type for everybody in a way. It plays
Yeah.
against type for Harrison, plays against type for Zemeckis a little bit.
Oh yeah.
To be honest with you, and like it so it feels like, yeah, I don't know. It just feels kind of interesting. Yeah, definitely have to watch it again. Let me know how you feel the second time through, because I
Oh,
really,
I
really enjoyed
definitely
it.
will.
I really, really enjoyed it.
It's one of those. I like that back '90s, early 2000s Harrison Ford run. I know
Right,
that it's very easy to point at that and be like he's phoning everything in or whatever. But
right.
man, I kind of
That was
love all
fun.
those movies in some
Yeah,
sort of weird way, and like I never feel like he's phoning it in. It's just Harrison
oh,
Ford being Harrison Ford. And
yeah.
can we just talk about the fact that that man is the Red Hulk now, and like all the there's a world where Indiana Jones and Harrison and like Han Solo, Rick Deckard is now Red Hulk.
Red Hulk. Yeah, Red Hulk.
Harrison Ford is the Red Hulk.
I get surprised. Like you're looking at 10, almost what is it? 10, almost by the time this movie comes out, the time Brave New World comes out, it'll have been 12 years since he played old man like Branch Rickey in 42. And
Yeah,
he almost even feeble then. And now he's like 10 years, they're 12 years older, and he's like hulking out and being like, I'm like, I'm all in on it.
I love that they even got Harrison Ford's chest hair on Red Hulk. Is all I'm saying. In the leaked trailer from
Yep.
B23, like
Yep.
when it finally shows his face and he turns, and like it's just got Harrison Ford's chest hair too, and I was like, God bless you guys at Marvel. You're really going for it. Like and I love that Harrison Ford is like, I just got to show up and just
Okay.
be mocap and have fun and just not give a shit. And like that was literally how he said it. He was like, I just had to learn to not give a shit. And it was like, I just love Harrison Ford. He is the man. He just
It is.
doesn't he has no qualms about being honest about it.
Right. And I'd say it's not, you can't say he doesn't care because he still puts his all into his work, but like he doesn't really like doesn't suffer fools and doesn't care about the
No.
nitty gritty of things, and like he just wants to have a good time. And that's what he did. That's what he does. I'm all here for it too. I also will say I
I am
like how Marvel has done with the Hulks is how they look like the Hulks look like the actors now more. Like Hulk looks like more Ruffalo more. And now Red Hulk
yeah.
looks like Harrison Ford still a little bit. I like that aspect of the character. It makes sense. It makes sense, and it's
No,
kind of
I
cool,
like
I guess.
that much better. Even She-Hulk looks a lot like Tatiana Maslany,
Tatiana,
obviously.
absolutely, absolutely.
So there's all the really I think it really helps. It sounds weird to say this, but I think that that actually is a credit to Lou Ferrigno and what they did with the TV show back in the day.
Absolutely.
Because with it being the Ferrigs when you originally made the show, that was a very human face that was painted green, and so you could really it feels different when you can see the face and you recognize the person. It
Right,
really humanizes the character in a way that it would be very easy to not feel.
right.
And I actually like even the Eric Bana one for what it's worth, they definitely try to give it Bana's face, but it never quite works
Fits.
at the
Yeah,
time.
right,
Um, I feel like the Norton one was the one that went closest to being like, we're just gonna go with the comic book design and call it a day.
right.
And there's nothing wrong with that inherently because I actually
No,
love the look of the Hulk in that movie. I really
sure.
like that movie more than most people. 1930s monster movie, like it's 100% a love letter to the Universal monsters. I dig it a lot.
I do too.
However, yeah. However, I do think that when you get to Avengers and we see Ruffalo's Hulk transform for the first time, and it very clearly has Ruffalo's face, and the longer he's been in the role, it's
Right.
continued to look more like him,
Yes.
has only strengthened how much better it looks.
Agreed. And it strengthens the fact that it strengthens it's better for the actor, I think, too, because the actor actually has
Yeah.
to really obviously act a little bit more and everything. You get more sense of what he's doing. We'll find out more about that because we did talk behind the scenes at one point. We are eventually going to tackle the MCU. We're just going to do it in like probably just do it in phases instead of trying to do the whole 1,000 films all at once because we struggle, not that we struggle, but like when we do Halloween we do like 12, 13 films at the end. We're kind of like, okay, we're good to be done now at this point. So I break up the MCU into like phases. I think it'd be easier for us to tackle. for sure.
It'll be interesting because we've definitely been talking about it, but then we say that, and we've been talking about what comes after John Wick and
Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street because those are our next franchises, and yet the two things that we've kind of potentially talked about having on deck are like 11 to 12 movies each.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
want to
true.
really lean in and like point too hard in what directions we're looking, but I think that we're just making excuses for ourselves to not over inundate ourselves on comic book stuff, and yet at the same time, I'm like, at the things we're looking at are still going to be long, and
Yeah,
we're still
no,
going to end
yeah,
up in the same spot. So, we might just have to power through it in the end when we decide to do it.
it could
Because
be. It could be. That might the MCU actually could eventually, by the time we get to it, it could actually take us a whole year. Could take us the entire that would be the whole year, pretty much.
honestly, it would almost have to be.
Oh, yeah,
Um, just because there's so much to it and there's so much going on within it
yeah,
that there would be to talk about. And the problem with the MCU, though, also is that it would also end up being that we'd interrupt a lot of other series that we're doing to do one-off episodes because the MCU is a continuing franchise.
right. And that has been our MO so far. Like when we do a series, we always kind of go when the
Yeah.
new one comes out. We kind of do we come back and do we did it for the Conjuring. We're have to do it for the Conjuring again when the final Conjuring movie comes out.
Yeah, that now that we know it's the final film.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to cap that off. And that's the one thing that's negative about that we didn't really think about, but we'll make it work. Is the more we go, the more franchises we've covered, the more
Yeah.
what else we're going to eventually have to start doing because we're going to have to catch it. We're going to have to catch a lot of them now. I mean, thinking about even looking at what we've done so far, it's like, wow, we got Halloween, we got Friday the 13th, we got Lord of the Rings, we got The Shining, we
Yeah,
got
and there's a Lord of the Rings this December.
right. We never actually did The Hobbit too. We still have to do the Hobbit movies at some point. Hobbit trilogy.
Well, to be fair, Buck specifically, our Patreon
That's true.
and patron Buck was like very specifically, please just do Lord of the Rings. He didn't want us to do the Hobbit movies.
Right.
Bless him. Not that I don't like those movies, but that's a commitment for me to sit down and watch 6 3.5 hour movies.
Absolutely. So, but I think now that we broke it up into 3, it's kind of nice. We could do that for the Hobbit at some point. I mean, I'm not saying anytime soon, but like we can definitely go back at some point to fill it out.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, this
Um,
week, actually speaking of patrons, this is actually we're finally doing this for Kelly Wang, our great patron.
No, we're not there yet. It's not even 15 minutes in. You cannot pivot into the episode this so early.
It was so perfect a transition. You mentioned the Patreon, the patron, patreon.com/PLD Projects with.
So last night, Paul did a Patreon hangout thing, apparently, where he did his state of the address to talk about all the things that we haven't talked about lately. And he didn't have me on, the fuck. And now he's like, I don't want to talk about anything else other than John Wick when we could be talking about the D23 announcements together or, all these other fun things.
Yeah, I could have been there last night. You should have just said, oh, okay, I can do it. I'll put it.
Some people have jobs and lives. I don't know what that's like, but I couldn't be there last night is all I'm saying.
It was perfect. Patreon.com/PLD. Brandon Buckingham, Austin Goodell, a bunch of great people on there. It's great if you can support. Now's the time to do it. I'm actually starting to get back in shape there, so some pretty cool things.
We both are, to be fair. We kind of took the summer off. We both were busy. We had a lot going on, and it just became very apparent that it was easier for us to put this aside for a little bit to regroup and reorganize and then jump back in than it would be to force the hand, because the truth of the matter is you never want this stuff to feel forced. You never want it to be not the thing that we love doing, because when it starts becoming a grind, it's very different and no longer fun. And it shows. And so we really made it a point to look, let's just take a break and come down, and then we'll move back into it. And I'm really glad we did, because ultimately it's also kind of allowed me to get out of and go to the movies again when I've had time. And I actually have been going to the movies a little bit more than I have been. And it's actually been a pretty good summer, all things being equal. And hey man, shout out to Deadpool and Wolverine for doing what I thought was going to be the impossible of hitting $1 billion, which I think is great.
I do too. I think that's wonderful. Yeah, no, you said it right. We did have also the hiatus because we did Doctor Who for a while. That kind of took over for a bit. I will say we went out on a high note. We got our last episode was a wonderful interview we'd had
Yeah,
when they were like
Vincent
alone.
DeSante.
DeSante was a great interview. Go back and check that out. That was like almost 2 or 3 months ago now, which is so weird. Like we had a great interview, and then we stopped, but it's fine. I get it. Totally get it. But yeah, no, I love the fact that we get a chance to do that. After that was done, after Doctor Who was done, we could have gone right back into it. But it kind of felt like, you know what, we were already taking time off. Let's just kind of like take actual time off for a minute,
Yeah.
and regroup. And regroup we did, and now I'm feeling rested, ready to go again. I missed talking with you about this stuff, and we text every day and everything, but like it's
You're like one of 2 people that I text with every single day,
yeah, every day.
and yet I still miss your stupid fucking mustache when we don't
I know.
get on camera to hang out. So, there's that. Yeah, I'm
Absolutely.
glad that we got to do this though, and I have to say, it's out there now. We can talk about this, right? Some motherfucker still tried to ice skate uphill is the line of the year. Just behind those are fucking onions.
I also would put Flame On in there as well.
Oh yes,
that was
all
a
right.
wonderful time.
This was something we were talking about last night. Actually, now that you have said that,
Yep.
There's a lot of talk right now about how legacy sequels and just like these movies handle things like that, and the idea that some of this stuff is studio mandated. There was a thread by William Bibiani. He's a mutual friend of ours. We've known him
Yep.
because of the Schmodown, and he was talking about it a little bit last night. And it was interesting because I totally saw the point he was making in his initial tweet about like trying to come after like biting nostalgia in a certain way. But I disagreed with it being the assessment that it was coming from the studios, because I so frequently find that when they do these like nostalgia type sequels, like, yeah, maybe the studio greenlights it, but eventually it's the creatives who actually really care about this stuff
Right.
that are making these love letters to these things. And it's funny because I ultimately actually prefer it when it feels like that love letter being done by an actual creative and a team, because it feels a lot more earnest and a lot more sincere than
Right.
when we get things that are clearly studio mandated. When you
Right.
look at things like The Flash, where so much of the back half of that movie feels so like studio saying, put this stuff into the movie XXYZ, versus you watch, there's no world, I think it wasn't Ryan Reynolds, who was like, what would be really funny? What if Wesley Snipes said that line from Blade again about people ice skating uphill? Like that was 100% like that sort of thing, in
Oh
the
yeah.
same way that Chris Evans being the Human Torch. Like all of that is coming from people who are like, let's play in the sandbox and like have fun with this. Your mileage clearly is going to vary,
Yeah, absolutely.
but it's okay.
I mean, Sean Lee has come out and said how pretty much was a conversation between him, Ryan, and he was involved too. They basically wanted to do a love letter to the X-Men series of films from Fox, even though we all know they definitely have their hills and
Ups and
valleys
downs.
for sure.
Yeah.
But like at the same time, it's like it's when you have your family and like, you can make fun of my brother, or I can make fun of my brother, but you can't, kind of situation. I love them, but I can make fun of them still. And they do it together. They made us feel like I mentioned in my review of the movie where I felt like a View Askew project or an Ocean's 11, where it just felt like best friends getting together, like having a blast making a movie, making the fans and viewers like feel like they're involved with it, like involved with the joke, inside with the joke with them. And there's no way in hell any of this was studio mandated. I can guarantee you that going into the MCU, Ryan Reynolds was like, okay, so we're going to the MCU, we're doing multiverse stuff. This is my opportunity to do this. Kevin, let me do this. And Kevin's like, of course, sure. The studio's like, yeah, they're going to let you do it because nostalgia is printing money sometimes. So studios are going to be okay with it. But as long as it's coming from that angle, I think it's earned and it's okay.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why I thought it was so interesting, because basically the basis was he felt it was weird when corporations buy an IP and then like do a nostalgia sequel that like celebrates this IP that they now own.
Right.
But I also kind of think that for me, it doesn't really make sense or really matter, because ultimately rights are always going to kind of be passed around, and it is what it is.
Especially
Like,
nowadays, yeah.
because I mean, I would even argue when you look at Halloween, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends as a trilogy,
Yeah.
the three of them are all very much love letters to very distinct movies and or tones of the franchise in each movie. And the Halloween movies have not been owned by Blumhouse the entire time. But they were done by someone who loved those movies and wanted to do something that honored every, little faction basically of the franchise. For better or worse, depending on who you talk to. Of course, we've covered all those on this podcast. You can go and listen to them.
And you can see what our thoughts are. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, that is very much what they do. And so I kind of have come to this conclusion that ultimately, at the end of the day, people like to complain about the things that don't work for them, and that's fine. But I still contend that it's much better to do what you and I do, where we like to talk about things and celebrate them in a fun, certain way.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I felt watching Deadpool and Wolverine.
I agree.
Ultimately, it was just very joyous for me because, to your point, every one of those movies had its hills and valleys. Like, it's not like the Fox movies are perfect. Very far from, honestly.
No.
There's a lot of real bad lows in that franchise, but their highs are high. But ultimately, you know what, man? We have to remember those early 2000s, that whole era of comic book filmmaking was so different. Like, it wasn't even until 2008 rolled around that Iron Man even uttered the word Avenger Initiative, or I should say Nick Fury uttered it at Iron Man. But like, no one was making them like that until 2008. The wilderness years, as I call them, of comic book movies is wild. And I think that they're important. And I was very glad that this movie embraced it.
Well, yeah, because we would never have gotten to where we are with comic book movies if it wasn't for these ancestors. I mean, starting with like Superman back in '78, Batman in '89, and then Blade, X-Men, Spider-Man, all in that same kind of era. And then even
Daredevil.
with even like I was about to say, even with the misfires like Daredevil and Elektra, I mean, we both like Daredevil, the director's cut. We were both pretty honest about that. But overall, the film was a miss for a lot of people, and that's fine. You have the Ghost Rider films. It also it seemed like the problem was at that point.
Soft spot for that first Ghost Rider movie, though. I'm not going to lie to you. I really
honestly don't really remember either of them, to be honest. I have to go back and rewatch them at some point.
They're so bad. I love them.
Yeah, Fantastic Four for the first too. Yeah, the first.
I like. You know what's so funny about that? Yeah, the Tim Story Fantastic Four is much better, I think, than it gets credit for. It has its lows. Jessica Alba is very miscast, and of course, so is the dude who plays Doom. Like Doom, the unforgiving thing about that movie is that Doom is just not well handled.
Like, I like Julian McMahon. I like the actor.
I do too.
But it just is. It's not. I don't think it's his fault. It's more just how he was written and the visual of the mask the way it is, and it just didn't work.
Yeah, that is unforgiving, and I don't love Alba in it, but I love everyone else. I actually think the movie is actually very well cast, and it does get the family dynamic a lot better than I think people give it credit for.
Absolutely.
And it totally gets the comics. Like, it really actually does. It's very family fun and like family affair type stuff. And like, Evans is giving it his all. He's so awesome in it. Like, Ian Groford's actually very good, I feel like, as Mr. Fantastic. I feel like I'm on an island about that, and that's okay.
No, I'm on that island with you. I'm on that island with you.
Perfect.
I like him on that.
I like him a lot. And of course, Michael Chiklis is the thing. Is like such comic book peak casting and continues to be comic book peak casting in a lot of ways. He was the only one I was a little bummed didn't show up in this, honestly.
Yeah, that's true. I was a little upset about that too, to be honest with you. It's kind of funny, just like I want to say, I mean, it was that part of that was the Marvel era where they had to sell off pieces, and that's why Spider-Man was at Sony and everything.
Right.
That's what happened, unfortunately. So this is really a great coming back together, that they're pretty much everybody's pretty much back in the fold except for like, Spider-Man family, who they worked with they have the deal with Sony to work with them at least. So that was kind of a celebration of that too. We're finally getting everybody back on board, and that's a good thing too. Going back to Fantastic Four real quick, though, I know we're supposed to be talking John Wick for almost 24 minutes, so we haven't even started yet.
Shocking. I finally got us back on track. We're back, baby. Yeah. Welcome.
I will say, I don't know about you, though. I want to say one last thing about Fantastic Four. I haven't put this out there in very many places yet. I kind of sat with myself and with it. The new footage for Fantastic Four. Are you all in on it?
Oh, I love it.
See, you are. Everybody is. I'm Not yet, and I don't know
You know why you're
why.
not? I do know
Why is
why.
that? Okay.
Because you've been burned too many times. That's exactly
Maybe.
it. And I think that that's a totally fair, like, I don't know, man. Like, this feels different. It looks different. It feels different. It could be really good, but you've been burned. And I get it. And it 100% is a fair reaction. But I'll say this. I love the retro future stuff.
Right.
I'm such a sucker for that as a thing. I think that the suits look awesome. I think it's really capturing that magnetic magic energy that the Fantastic Four comics themselves only give off. Like, those comics have such a specific feel. If you remember the first time you ever opened a Fantastic Four comic book, you know what I'm talking about. Like,
Mhm.
all comics have their feel.
Yeah.
The Fantastic Fours is very specific. It doesn't matter if you're reading the original Ditko and Lee runs. It doesn't matter if you're looking at some of the like Ultimate runs from the 2000s that they're not always the best sometimes, but like they have a very specific feel and tone that I feel like this footage is capturing in a way that I wasn't anticipating in a good way. And I
Right.
also think that the sh- the fact that we get that shot of Galactus
Mm.
and you see Galactus for the first time and it's like the him looking into the buildings and stuff, it's so Titan kaiju-esque, which is why I'm glad that it's Matt Shackman who's doing this because he had worked on Monarch. It just feels larger than life in a way that I think Fantastic Four has never landed.
No, I get that,
I
absolutely.
say that Tim Story movies captured the family dynamic because they did, but it looks like the Shackman one is gonna also get that, like,
Scope?
yeah, the scope and the feel of, like, the science adventure nerds, like,
Right.
these people who, like, actually traverse the negative zone
Yeah.
and all these things, and I think that's really fun and it's really exciting, and I kinda love that because why not, right? Especially because it's an Elseworld story of because look, all things being equal, it's gotta end with their universe being destroyed by Galactus, right? That
It's gotta be, right? That's the way it's
it's gotta
kinda
be.
setting itself up at this point.
Yeah.
I will
So
say, real quick, I think the one thing about it is I will automatically say it is definitely taking big swings. The whole retro 60s thing and everything else is a big swing. I just don't know how comfortable I am with it now yet. And I think part of that is I haven't really seen a trailer yet. We've seen like little footage pieces and stuff like that, but like that's not it's a difference between seeing a full on I think I need to see a full on trailer before I can make up my mind on how I am with this. I do like the cast. I wasn't sold on Pedro Pascal when he was announced. I just didn't see him as my read. But now that I've
mhm.
seen him with Vanessa Kirby, they have such great chemistry, even just in photograph stills. Like I like, okay,
Yeah.
I get it. I get it.
Did you see that video of them while they were at Comic-Con? So they
Yes.
flew back for Comic-Con, and so he is very honest about his anxiety and how he deals with all of that,
Mhm.
during the press events, and he was standing there, and you could see that the anxiety was starting to take over, and Vanessa Kirby totally notices, and she grabs his hand and starts holding his hand, and it was
Mhm.
exactly the Reed and Sue dynamic that I
Absolutely.
100% was like, "Oh my god." They're
Yeah.
perfect. I'm getting chills right now talking about it. I was like, "That's perfect." I love it.
I agree. I agree, and that's why I am now sold on Pedro and Vanessa, and I'm sold on the rest of the cast as well. So that has got me. I'm just not sure of the wild swing. I mean, it's kind of like a WandaVision kind of swing in a way too. It feels like it's like
Yeah.
a really weird choice to do, but WandaVision worked for me as well, so I definitely could see it working for me. I just can't. I wish I was as all on board as everybody else was, as everybody else is, I guess I should say. But I'm not against it yet. I think
But
I'm kind of in a wait and see mode at this point still.
you and I and again, I think that people forget, like, yeah, I'm all in, but that's because I tend to be the optimist out of all of us, unless we're talking about Alien Romulus. So,
Sure,
with
sure.
my undying, optimism, I'm already like, I think they've got it, like, I'm
Right,
real
right,
excited. I think it's gonna be great.
right.
But you and I are older than a lot of the people who seem very excited about this because they
Yeah,
never had to live through it, and most of them seem to have forgotten already about Fan Four Stick. So
yeah. Oh
there's that.
god, yeah, there's that too.
Uh, it is what it is, right?
Right,
It is what
absolutely,
it is. And
absolutely.
one last thing, Downey Jr. being back as Doom is cool casting. Dear Internet, This is not done as some nostalgia bait for you. And Downey Jr. doesn't just come back just because he can now and because they begged him. He has an Oscar. This was done for a purpose. Fucking relax.
This is where you and I are not entirely on the same page yet either. But again, I'm not anti. I'm just more of that. Okay.
Oh, I'm not like,
see.
I'm definitely still cautious, but
Yeah.
I feel like Downey Jr. doesn't do it unless he just, he has no reason to just go back to this now that he has an Oscar. The dude could do anything.
He could.
So
Yeah, I mean, he
I
definitely
have to
enjoys it.
assume, because there's no world this is also the sacred timeline do. There's just no world.
Right.
So we have to know it's got to be a variant Elseworlds version of the character. It's 100% going to be a play off of the Stark of it all in some capacity.
Absolutely.
I think that this plays into whatever it was that the Russo brothers were talking about initially during the Infinity War and Endgame press junkets, when they kept saying that they had ideas for Secret Wars, but they didn't think they'd ever get allowed to do it because they thought for sure Marvel and Disney would say no. Clearly that is not the case.
Right.
And I have to think that they see this as some sort of way to play it up, because it's only going to mess with them further if they knock the mask off and see that it looks like a deranged Stark underneath. For a lot of the characters, I see what they're going for on the outside. Again, on the surface, it looks real weird. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't.
Absolutely.
But
absolutely.
Hey, this is a great way for them to get Downey Jr., Tobey Maguire, and Hugh Jackman on screen together.
Yeah, that should be a blast. It could be very much a blast. So I'm again cautious about it. Cautiously, I can't even say cautiously optimistic. I'm just kind of like, take it and see. I'm not anti at all, and that's the big thing so far. So hopefully that will continue to go, and we'll see how it develops as we go. I will say I've loved everything I've seen from Brave New World, and I definitely
like everything from that.
And I definitely like that as much. And so Thunderbolts looks like it's going to be fun, although I kind of worry about its success. I don't know if Thunderbolts.
I think it's going to be great. I think it'll do well. I think that the problem is right now is that I think you're right. It's easy to get lost in all of it, but I think the truth of the matter is we are not realizing how interconnected it is to Brave New World, and it's part of why that they're not marketing it yet as heavily. Because I know that a lot of what happens in Brave New World is fallout of this movie.
Right.
So there's a lot kind of riding on that. And the other thing is it's kind of also very much a pseudo sequel to Black Widow. And I think that is a weird thing for a lot of people, because Black Widow kind of came and went, I feel like.
Wasn't very successful overall, yeah.
Well, and it was the first COVID movie.
Right, exactly. But also, it was just kind of weirdly placed too. It was like this, like we just did Endgame. Now we're going to go back in the timeline immediately before Endgame, and it just felt weird. And yeah. I mean, it wasn't awful.
I like the movie actually quite a bit overall, but I'm always team more David Harbour.
That part I loved. I love David Harbour, and I love Florence Pugh, to be honest with you. And I think I actually love Scarlett Johansson too. I didn't love just the timing of it more than anything else, I think. But
yeah, but it's a very interesting time to be a fan of all this, especially because it seems like even Marvel has been like, they're kind of pivoting. We all know the multiverse stuff is coming to an end, obviously. Like, that's the point of Secret Wars. But they've also even been like, yeah, it's not the multiverse saga anymore. We're like already into the mutant saga. And it was like, wait, what? Like, this isn't ended yet, though. And Feige's like, no, it's the mutant saga now. It's the mutant saga, because they have to try to distance themselves so much from all the Kang of it all because of the Jonathan Majors situation on top of it, which is like, man, what a bad timing for all of this.
Yeah, I think that's why.
What a piece of shit that dude is on top of it. Like,
that's why Feige did it, though. I think that's one of the reasons why, like, there's all mutants all the time now. It's an easy way to kind of like, okay, we need to pivot. We need to get this out. We need to try something else, and that's part of why we can get excited about mutants again and excited about that kind of thing. I think that's what does it, to be honest with you.
It's so funny because I kind of thought that Avengers 5, before we found out it was going to be Doomsday, I really did think it was going to end up being Avengers versus X-Men, because
I
Feige had
kind of
been
thought that
saying
too.
that. And I was like, oh, they're going to do like basically like the incursion is the Fox Universe cast, or like stunt casting X-Men show up,
Right.
and they're seen as a threat, basically.
Right.
I thought that's kind of where they were going, but in a way, I'm also glad that that's not the angle that they're going. I think that Avengers versus X-Men thing is better saved for a new timeline. Yeah, and after they're developed.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree too. But anyway, I think now is time I can shift. I can shift now because I think Kelly's been waiting long enough.
No, I think we could at least go another hour on everything. All right, fine.
You mentioned it before. You mentioned it before. We did Lord of the Rings for our patron Brandon Buckingham. This was at once. This was a tier we did for a while where our patrons could choose a franchise for us. Kelly chose Pitch Perfect for us. We kind of showed some hesitation about covering that on the certain. It's not something we really want to cover. I'll be honest with you. I don't mind those movies, but it's not a movie I want to go deep into.
It's one of those. There's not. We try to go to. This sounds weird, and it's just that there's a lot of lore to these movies. There's a lot. The things we cover, there's a lot to. We want to talk about them where we can unfold them and unpack them. Pitch Perfect does not allow me to do that.
Absolutely. So Kelly was very kind, and she shifted over to John Wick, which is another her choice. And I said, well, absolutely, we can definitely do John Wick. And just so everybody knows out there at the Patreon level, at the $20 tier, you can suggest a franchise. I did put that back on the board so they can suggest it. I did also add the caveat that we have final approval over it, obviously.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's all. Because we are always looking for good suggestions. And if you get the $20 tier, we'll definitely we'll work with you for sure. And we'll definitely, but you know the kind of movies we like, we can go deep on. So I think if you know what we think and you know us, we'll do almost anything you really would want us to do, or at least we'll work with you on it. Like I said, work with Kelly. But Kelly was supposed to get this like last year, and then we had to push it back. I forgot what we had to push it back for. Was it for Friday or was it for?
We initially thought that we weren't going to get so caught up in Friday being so long, and we were like, we're going to do it. Okay, well, let's just wait. We'll do Friday, and then we'll do John Wick. And then somewhere along the way, Doctor Who happened, and somewhere along the way, it just kind of kept snowballing.
Well, yeah, because I remember, I think we were supposed to actually do it before Friday the 13th.
That's what I mean.
Then? Yeah, because we did Indy. We're going to do it after Indy, but then we had some schedule delays, and if we had waited any longer, we wanted to have Friday the 13th during spooky season. That was our goal. So we had,
and we also wanted to get it so we could get to Never Hike Alone too. Remember, because we were hoping to get it as part of it.
Right, and that was part of it. So then we're like, okay, we're going to push it back, and unfortunately, that's a long series. Nightmare Friday the 13th is a long series, especially if you're including the two Never Hike Alones.
There was a Freudian slip there.
Yeah, that wasn't Freudian slip there. But then she was very kind to let us go on, and then I said, okay, we'll do it next. And then of course next thing we do is we go on hiatus. So we do Doctor Who, and then we're gonna come back last week, and we're gonna do it then. And then you got.
And what Kelly doesn't know is we're not actually doing John Wick here today.
Surprise!
Because we're actually doing the Bill and Ted franchise.
That would be the last straw.
I mean, actually, I say that and I joke about it, and yet every part of me is like, we could actually do the Bill and Ted movies.
I would do the Bill and Ted movies. Those are absolutely a trilogy to cover. I mean, it's a short stream trilogy we could do. Absolutely, I would cover that.
All three of those movies, 90 minutes.
Yeah,
perfect.
Absolutely.
I just rewatched the first one. I got the new 4K set that Shout put out.
Right, you saw that. I saw that. Exciting stuff, man. Exciting stuff.
Oh my god! Dude, Bill and Ted in 4K. That's all I'm saying.
It's over. We're done. 39 minutes in. Here we go. Just a pencil. Baba Yaga. Motivation. Revenge killing. Let's get into it. John Wick.
We're talking the John Wick franchise, which was born out of next to nothingness. That's not a joke, by the way. We have to remember, guys, back in the year of our Lord Cthulhu, 2014, when this movie was on the scene, it was a next to nothing budgeted film that was not really picked up by anyone of any major note when it came to the studios or anything. No one was really talking about it. No one seemed to be like really excited about it. The first trailer came out like a month and a half before the movie even was going to be in theaters. It was just a movie that everyone was like, oh, it's a new Keanu Reeves action movie. And from the dude who did the stunt work on The Matrix, which is great. That means that there's history here, but it didn't seem like a movie that was gearing up for the masses in a way that like the franchise is now huge and successful in this worldwide phenomenon.
Look, we as two moviegoers, two movie lovers, we love action movies. We're big action movies. We also understand
You and I
that
talk
action
about how
movies,
we need more of this stuff.
absolutely 100%. But at the same time, their action movies are generally speaking, especially more nowadays, since like the 80s. I mean, 80s and 90s are really the heyday of action. 2000s on, they became more of this kind of like they're there, they're fun, but they're kind of come and go. Like they're here today, gone tomorrow, kind of thing. There's not a whole lot they don't last as long as far as cultural zeitgeist goes. You have like the ton of Liam Neeson action pieces that kind of like are almost replaceable. Just stick it Liam Neeson into the lead role, and it's all very similar. And this kind of felt like that. Like before I saw it, like this kind of felt like okay, so it's Keanu Reeves pulling an old man Liam Neeson now. Okay, so Keanu Reeves is going to start doing this kind of stuff, and this is going to be.
Well,
I didn't expect to. I expected to be John Wick, and then like it would go on to be a different kind of movie, just like John Wick in a way. Like, but without having seen it, I totally judged it without having watched it.
and we also have to remember, to your point of all of that, is back when this movie was coming out, Keanu was still kind of a meme. And look, he still is, but in a more lovable way. But when this movie was coming out, even a decade ago, people were still not high on him as an actor.
Right?
Like when you talked about Keanu on the internet, a lot of the time it was more pointed at a lot of his acting in movies that people, yeah, like there was just kind of this vibe about him that people didn't take him seriously. Because this was kind of,
he wasn't a star. Like,
right.
there was no,
He hadn't been in since The Matrix.
Yeah, The Matrix, and he had done a lot of other movies since then, but none of them were very memorable. At least they didn't stick around in the zeitgeist, really.
Like, yeah, because he had done like the Day the Earth Stood Still remake that Scott Derrickson directed, like
Constantine,
which I love Constantine.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong,
I
but
do too.
But you know, he really wasn't doing. What was it? 47 Ronin. That was another one.
Did he direct that one? I want to say.
No, I don't think he did. I think he was very creatively involved, but I don't. He directed a different one.
Okay, I was wrong on that. You're right. I can't remember which one he did, but yeah, I remember there was. He was very heavily involved. Yeah, like, looking at his thing now, we got like Street Kings, The Lake House, A Scanner Darkly, 47 Ronin,
I do love
Generation.
But again, it was nothing that was standing out, right?
Right. It was. He's not a star. He's just. It's the Matrix guy. Okay. All right. Well, I'll go watch it, I guess. And some people throw it back to it's the Point Break guy, or it's the Bill and Ted guy. But
yeah,
he was not a superstar anymore. He's a fading star. And all of a sudden this changes everything.
Because this movie ends up coming out to just about what you could ask for as universal acclaim.
Yeah.
They looked at this movie and put Keanu back on the map. Stahelski suddenly is like this shooting star of a filmmaker. You know, you have to look at that stuff and be like, oh my God, like, look at this guy. Look at how far they've come. David Leitch is involved in this too, because he's kind of a co-director on the first movie. People forget that. That's why David Leitch, the filmmaker now, got so big, was because he was so involved with these movies, or at least this first one. That's where he starts his ascent too. This movie is chock full of a bunch of people you love. We're putting them in a movie where the whole basis is Keanu plays a dude who is an ex-assassin whose dog gets murdered and he goes on a rampage.
It's a simple revenge thriller, revenge action thriller.
It's deathwish.
That's what it is. And it's like, so it's almost like hard to understand what exactly from the outside, what exactly made it magical. Cause it's like, okay, we've seen Keanu before, we've seen action movies before, we've seen revenge movies before, but yet you watch it and there's something that like just when the first time I watched it, I was like, wow, this is like really redefining action for me. It was like a shot in the arm, like where it all of a sudden wasn't just disposable set piece anymore. It was like they really care about their action. They really want to make this look as good as possible. And they do everything. It's a throwback in all of the best ways. I would say it actually feels like an 80s or 90s action movie, like those ones we used
I
to watch
agree.
all the time. Because it just it knows how to set up the characters, knows how to set up the tension, and it gives you exactly what you want out of it, and doesn't try to overcomplicate things too much, which we'll get into next couple episodes. I've always had this argument that I like. I think I still prefer this film to the rest of them because this is the most simplistic tale, and there's something about that simplicity which I love. It gets a little more overly complex, a little more overly lore driven, a little more overly video game esque feel to it as it goes on. And I have come aboard on that. By the time John Wick 3 or 4 rolls around, I was completely on board with it. But there's something about this one that the magic is just so there for me on every level, and it's a wonderful film.
I think you 100% nail it and are right in what you're saying, because I do think that there's a lot of magic in the bottle,
Right,
lightning in a bottle type of feel to this movie. But I also think ultimately, shockingly enough, I think it runs through the franchise, because I think a lot of the stuff that I continue to love about the subsequent movies is all stuff that is started here. In the way that the world is built out, in the way that the characters are built out, in the way that it all fluctuates and works together. Because I've learned from you that I like to have the movie kind of on the side while we're
yeah,
talking. And so I'm actually at the scene when he goes back to the Continental for the first time, and he's walking through, and like Addie being like, what's life like on the other side, and all these things where people are so curious about the fact that he's even come back, but they also seem so like in the dark of what it's like to not be in a world full of assassins and
right.
killers and all these things. And you get this feeling like, even early on, the lore behind this, like you just get this feel that, oh, this world is already different and I'm in something that I'm not used to. So it feels like those movies that we loved from the 90s and the 80s, but with this much deeper world than
Right.
some of those movies offered in the past.
I think two things I want to say. First of all, just specifically about that scene, because I didn't write many notes down for this movie. I told PJ this before. I usually write a ton of notes. I'm winging it a little bit more, not because I was lazy about it, because I just feel like there's a lot to talk about that I don't need to write notes for. But I specifically wrote, I love this moment where he talks to the bartender, because everything that he has been through, this dude already, we know, like, spoilers. Obviously, if you haven't watched the movie, I don't know why you're here, but I always like throw it
But we're
out there.
happy
We
to
are doing
have
full
you.
spoiler. We're happy.
Shut the hell up, Paul.
Well, I'm just meaning we're going to talk full spoilers, so you should probably
I
check
know.
the
I just
movie
had to
out.
give you a hard time, because what the hell are they doing here? They're here because they like us. Isn't that enough? Like,
Sure.
don't scare them away. Don't be an
True.
asshole about it.
But spoilers or whatever, John Wick, like this dude is getting. I mean, he's been through a lot of action shit, like just in general, a tough life. He got out. He marries this wonderful woman. She dies a few days ago, prior to the movie starting. He gets the puppy, and the puppy gets killed. His car gets stolen, and yet at the end of the time, he starts talking to the bartender. The bartender's asking about it, and what does he do? He starts smiling, because quite frankly, this is who he is. Like, it's one of
I
those
just
movies you
realized.
can't deny. You can't deny who you are. And even though John Wick is not necessarily a good person, but he is a genuine person. And I love that little twinkle in there.
The actress who plays the bartender,
Uh-huh.
Bridget Reagan,
Right.
she's Dottie in Agent Carter.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about that.
I
I didn't even
just
make the connection
realized
there.
that. I never really put that together before this. That's so funny.
That is pretty funny. That is pretty funny.
Yeah, what a small thing, but
Yeah.
I like
But
that.
going back to your lore idea, and to couple it back with what I had just initially said, I agree. I think I personally like that we don't go all in on the lore, that it's kind of like this like secretive we kind of dip our toes in. We know it goes deeper, but we don't need to go deeper. Whereas in like the sequels, we go all in on it. That's okay
because
too.
you should at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. As it develops, you kind of have to. But I was surprised. I remember being very surprised at how little Ian McShane is actually in this movie
Mhm.
comparatively, and Lance Reddick, the great late great Lance Reddick as well. They both get significant upgrades in future installments, and I'm glad they do, and they should have because they were scene stealers in the time they had. But I just didn't remember until rewatching and like that they're only in like I don't even know how many minutes total does Ian McShane have on screen, like 10, if that,
Not
5,
even probably.
5,
Yeah, I was gonna say
like
maybe. Well, in the same way that, like, one of my favorite characters in the movie is Aurelio, played by
mm,
John Leguizamo. He has a
hey,
grand total of 2 scenes.
so good.
He's so good, but he has a grand total of 2 scenes.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, you know
You know what? I'm gonna put forth one of those kind of like theories or whatever. I think that one of the things that makes this movie so great and makes any movie so great, especially an action movie like this, is when you fill out those roles with actors like that, it makes it so much more magical and memorable because you have real actors playing real roles. It's kind of like what, and again, not to like overkill. I know I'm old, but those 90s and 80s action things, when you had like the villains, they were played by like Academy Award winners. Like
well, yeah, I mean,
somewhere along the line, like it feels like action kind of like got left to more of the action people, whereas there used to be actual like real actors in these roles. John Wick does that to a degree, and
yeah.
I love that, and I think it makes it just a little step above the rest.
It's 100% one of those things that I think people really take it for granted when these movies are looked at as actual movies. Um, it was a thing that actually made me really happy about the new Beverly Hills Cop. When you look at it, when you put a Kevin Bacon in the villain role,
Mm,
like, because that sort of thing, that's the kind of thing where an actor like him can really go in on that
mm,
and do something with it. I think it's really important to fill the roles out in your movies with, hey, that guy, hey,
hey,
that
that
lady
guy.
type of actors. Like, you need those character actors and like real serious thespian types at times to fill out these worlds and these roles because it really does add to that air of the excitement that you're feeling. And it really makes the world feel real.
Right.
Um, there's a movie called Snitch that was kind of like an action drama. It was, God, it's probably almost a decade old, maybe a decade older now than
Yeah.
it was, and it had The Rock. But one of
Yep.
the best things about that movie is that John Bernthal is the co-lead. And
Yeah.
Bernthal is one of those dudes that when you put him in a thing, people don't really appreciate John Bernthal the actor. But John Bernthal the actor is like the real deal. He's the reason that Daredevil season 2 is my favorite season. Like,
That's a good point. That's absolutely a good point.
yeah.
That John Bernthal is that way as well. Absolutely.
And so
Um,
you need those roles to be filled out, right? There's a reason that when you look back at movies like Lethal Weapon or Lethal Weapon 2 or Die Hard, like, yeah, they're filled with people who are
The
like
Rock.
real actors. Yeah, they're a rock. You're putting guys who are in these movies. Honestly, it was the one thing Robert Rodriguez really got with the Machete movies. Like, yeah,
Mm,
he uses stunt casting all the time. That's his whole thing. It's always been his whole thing. All his movies are full of stunt casting. But you know why you do it? Because when you fill it with that type of caliber of actor, your world is so different and they're really going for it.
yeah, because also like even like every action movie has its star. And you know that Keanu Reeves, you can say whatever you want about his acting skills. You know he's going to deliver his Keanu Reeves-ness. You know what you're going to get throughout the rest of the film. So when he's not on screen and you can fill it with these other people who are just as interesting, you don't ever lose interest in the movie. Sometimes, because when you don't, it's like, okay, when Keanu's on screen, you're like, okay, let's just get back to the Keanu kicking ass. All right. No, this time you're like, oh, what? I really want to know what Ian McShane's going to say here. Oh, I really want to see what John Leguizamo's going to do here. Like, you get
Oh, what is
invested the
Michael
whole time.
Nyquist up to right now? Like,
Right.
I love all his dialogue. I love all his scenes. Like,
Mhm.
honestly, and there's little moments all kind of throughout these. The Willem Dafoe, and that's another one. Willem Dafoe being in this grounds this movie in such a specifically beautiful way. it just works because you have his character Marcus, who has clearly been in John's life for a long time and wants John to have nothing to do with any of this because he wants John to stay out.
Right.
And yet,
I almost forget that he's in it. I almost forgot that he was in it. Like every time I watch, I'm like, oh yeah, Willem Dafoe's in this, and he's such a great part in this movie too. I mean, I love the fact that you go through the entire time and she plays it so well and so close to the vest that you're never quite sure the first time you watch it. You're never quite sure. Did he miss that on purpose? I mean, by the end, you obviously understand what's going on. You're like, I don't know. Is he betraying him? Is he not betraying him? Is he helping him? Is he hurting him? I don't know what's going on here. But like, I love how you're playing it that close to the vest because Willem Dafoe just has that skill to him that he's so engaging that you get engaged in that part of the story, even though he's in it for like what, maybe 6-7 minutes at this point.
He gets a good action too.
He does. He's a great action. He gets a great death too. I love his death is like just brilliantly out there.
Yeah, it's so funny too because one of the things I like also is that this movie, even though it's the first movie, right? It kind of reminds me of A New Hope in that regard that this world is very fleshed out already. And like, even though we don't know the story that got us there, the world feels very real and it doesn't talk down to the audience. And it just asks you to go on this ride. It just asks you to like let everything happen. So there's this moment when John is going to go to the club and he's looking after Lusoff. He's looking for Lusoff, Alfie Allison's character. Or Alfie Allen's character. Sorry.
Theon. Sorry, I still call him Theon. I just can't help but call him Theon.
But he's going to look for him, and there's a great Kevin Nash cameo. He plays a guy named Francis who's a bouncer here. And when Wick shows up, and he's kind of in the shadows, and I love the way they do it, and he puts the gun to his head, and he's like talking to this character Francis, and he's basically like, hey, I think you need to take the night off.
I take the night out. Thank
you.
And
Francis because he goes, you know what? Are you here on business? He goes, afraid so. You should take the night off. And he pulls the earpiece out and he says, thank you, sir. And he looks scared. And he just leaves. And it's one of those, you don't need more context, right? No. Like we've already had more context leading into this because there's the whole, I saw this man kill with a fucking pencil, that whole speech about the Baba Yaga.
Let me tell you about that. It's one of the key points I wanted to raise about this entire film. One of my favorite things used to watch Action Movie Anatomy with Ben Bateman and Drew Guy. They used to have this thing they called the Hero Qualifier. And basically it was a speech anybody made about the hero to let you know how badass they were. I don't know if any film does it better than this film because multiple people.
There's one I can think of.
Go ahead, throw it out there. I'm just kind of curious.
Rogue Nation, the Manifest Destiny, Alec Baldwin speech about Ethan Hunt is maybe the best version of that.
That's like I'm talking. All right. I know what you're saying there, and I don't disagree. I would actually argue also Olympus Has Fallen. Angela Bassett about.
Of course you would.
Angela Bassett about Jerry B. He'll boo balance or die try and that whole thing. But specifically about John Wick, though, I want to throw out there, it's not just the individual. It's done several times as the build before you even know much about the character. All of a sudden, like it's boom, 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 boom. You got John Leguizamo doing it. Just turn around or get the fuck out of my shop. Get the fuck out. You sold John Wick's car. Get the fuck out of my shop. And he calls Nyquist. He's like, "Are you hit my son? What the hell are you doing?" Yeah, he sold John Wick's car.
Oh, yeah. And then he just hangs up. Yeah.
Why'd you hit my son? Oh, it was one of the best deliveries in the entire movie. And I gotta tell you, I liked Michael Nyquist in this film much more than I had previously. For some reason, I'm not a huge Nyquist fan all the time. He's like the weak link in Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol. I always thought he was kind of like okay compared to some other villains we get later on, but I really dug deep into his character this time, and I loved it. I loved him this time. I think he preferred the same. I don't know why I was missing it before, but that one line delivery right there to sum up the whole thing. Oh,
well, he has that line too, because once the ball is rolling, and he does have the conversation with his son, and he goes, "Look, he's gonna come and kill you, and I can't stop him. Like this is on you. Like I'm sorry, you did this. You messed with this guy, and there's nothing I can do other than it was nice being your father."
Yeah. And he's like, I'm gonna, and he's like, not, and it's not that he's not trying. He's not gonna give up, and he's gonna try. And the next thing is like, all right, task your men. How many? How many do you have? It's
Yeah.
like, oh man. And then so this
They
film does it
really
better.
they do, and they really just build and they really convince you that this guy is just a monster. And I love that because it really makes he finally starts attacking everyone in the house when they come for him the first time. You're not really prepared for
No.
how hard that Keanu's about to go through this army of men in the house.
Right. Yeah. Like the first time he gets killed, or not gets killed, his dog gets killed. They attack him when he's not ready for it. He's obviously been out of the game for a little bit and he's not ready. And he gets beat up. You're kind of like, okay, so who is this guy? Why do we care? And then all of a sudden, you see him cleaning up.
Yeah.
Like he's mad, but he's still cleaning up. And then you kind of hear these stories about him. He kind of keeps building. Next thing you see him with a sledgehammer, he's breaking
Yeah.
into the concrete. You're like, oh, you gotta kind of set
Yeah.
up a little more. Go like, okay, what is this guy gonna do? You get the fucking pencil story. You're like, fuck. And then you get it's almost like the rematch. They come in later to kill him, and he is like all over them and kills them almost like with ease in a great, brilliant action sequence. So much fun.
Yes.
But then the best part about that isn't the action part; it's the follow up with the two things that are follow up. You get the cop coming in.
Yeah. Which is great, by the way. The David
Yeah.
Patrick Kelly character, Charlie.
That him too. He's the other. He's the
Oh, you're
second one.
talking about
The cop
yes,
person comes in. He's like, yeah,
Jimmy, Thomas
Jimmy.
Sadowski's character.
Like, noise complaint. Noise complaint.
Noise complaint.
You back to work? Just fixing some things up or cleaning some things up, last minute things. Okay. And that's the conversation. Yeah. And then you had the dinner reservation for 12, and David Patrick Kelly, of course, T-Bird from The Crow, which is what I love him in.
Yeah.
Of course, he comes in. It's like, John. That's what I mean about the lore there. That perfect, like, we're going to dip our toes into the lore, and then we're like not too far in, but you get in just enough of it. Loved that so much. It's all come in with their cleaning
it's
things.
Just such a perfect dichotomy and build. And again, I think it's just so cool how also it's coming down to the characters and these actors you put into it, because they're all kind of people that you recognize in some regard. You know who would be great in this franchise would be David Harbour, actually. The more I think about it, David Harbour would be like a perfect character within this universe. He's got the right juice for this. Yeah, absolutely. Like he would totally fit these movies. But I think that because it's so chock full of character actors or just like people that you kind of recognize, even if it's like a fleeting glimpse, it just really reiterates that this is a world that you really want to dive into more. Yeah. And you start to really kind of vibe with it. And I love too that this is very clean action. Something we don't talk about enough is that for as much as I like the Jason Bourne movies, I think that the biggest problem with what that franchise did is it made shaky cam and quick cut edits all the rage in the 2000s.
Yeah.
And I also have to kind of blame Michael Bay because the Transformers movies had that a lot in the first two, because it was also about trying to cut cost in what you were showing with the Transformers action. The good thing with the third one was that because it was shot in 3D, it did not allow them to do that. And you had to slow down the action and you actually had to show what was going on.
Right.
That's why that's the best movie in that franchise. I digress. But one of the things that I really appreciated about this is that you look at it and you can tell that Stahelski and Keanu looked at it like The Matrix, where they were like, we want you to see every bit of action. We never want it to be so close up that you can't see what's going on. We never want it to be so quick cut that you have a hard time keeping up with or keeping track of what is happening on screen. We want this to be a movie that you go back to and you can pinpoint every movement, every beat. Everything feels like it makes sense, like the continuity of the action scenes flow. You never want it to feel like you're seeing things too many times or not enough of a thing. Like, they really took their time with the action beats, and it really helped set this movie apart for that.
I 100% agree with you. 100% agree with you. It's so individualized and so like it's surprising. Like a lot of people, I think a lot of filmmakers tend to make the wrong assumption that faster is better, like speed is better because you want to look so badass that they're just flying through at the speed of light, and like it works sometimes. Like I think it worked for me. It worked best like Obi-Wan and Anakin in Episode 3. That made sense to me to
Mhm.
do it that way. But like this, even though it's not as fast, feels more real. You feel this actually reminded me of John Woo in a way where like you feel each punch, you feel each kick. Like it's not just mindless action. Kind of like okay, let's just turn. No, you can gauge. I could actually. I started hurting a little bit. Like oh, that one. Oh, that. I feel the bone snapping. I feel that.
Yeah.
It's just tactile, and something about that kind of action which makes it more real because you engage with it more. You don't just let it go on and be
It's
the background. You have to engage with it to get there.
I think the best action movies are the ones where you are so enthralled by it that you can't look away, to your point. And I
Right.
think that one of the beautiful things about this film in particular and this franchise in particular is that these guys are such fans of action movies and specifically a lot of Asian action movies that every one of the sequences is it almost feels like a dance. And
Yes.
that's what I love about it because the choreography, the movements, the everything that they're doing is dynamic. It's exciting, it's fun, it's beautiful, it's
Hmm.
different and you feel every movement, you feel everything that you're seeing. And I really appreciate that kind of feel. You're right. You feel every hit. You feel every bone break. There's a lot of ooh, ooh, that must hurt. Ow, that sucks. And I
Right.
love that because I grew up watching martial arts movies. I love the Jet Lis, the Jackie Chans, the Donnie Yens, and oh man, we will get to the Donnie Yens of it all.
Woo!
But man, when you're watching it, it just feels otherworldly and it
Right.
becomes like you can't look away. And I
Right.
really, really appreciate that because a great action sequence should feel like a dance routine. You should be hypnotized by it. You should be just enthralled with what you're watching. And when it's done that way, it's oddly beautiful.
Yes. It's like a real ballet. It's a real dance,
Yeah,
and that's what makes it work. It's because you're watching these actors; they're actually obviously fully engaged. It's great stunt people. I mean, Keanu, this is actually one of those films that has been like leading the charge and like trying to get the Academy Award for stunts, kind of thing, because they really take it as so seriously as part of this film. They're probably the most important, not my the most important, but one of the most important parts of this film is that obviously the meaning leading up to the Fall Guy, kind of doing a similar idea and try to
yeah.
really get that. It feels like we're getting there. It feels like we're going to get
Directed
that
by
sometime soon. Directed by David Leitch, of course. Leitch, of course,
right.
absolutely. And I love that about it because it really takes some of these background stuff that we don't think about as much and makes us think about it a little bit more because it's effective. And when it's effective, it's great. And when it's not
And
effective,
I
it's forgettable.
and I think that was what made this movie pop so hard when it came out. Because
Mm,
honestly, right around the same time that these were coming out, the Raid movies had started also slowly building around the same time.
right. Yep.
Because the Raid 2 is 2014, 2015 also. So
Yeah.
the when it came to like action movies, there was a mass of people in America who were kind of rediscovering martial arts movies,
Yep.
and these movies really started to play
Benefit.
into what we wanted our action movies to be again. And
Right.
then John Wick lands on the scene, and suddenly we have an American action franchise that feels nothing like we've had in American action movies in so long. Because again, 2014, in that same year, you're looking at like, what is that? Winter Soldier came out that year, probably, or right around
Somewhere
that
around
time
there.
as Winter Soldier. Like, you're
Yeah.
looking at Iron Man 3 right around that time. That was the year before. Thor the Dark World would have been right around that time. Like, you're looking at the superhero boom still, right?
Right.
Because we're still
Hmm.
post Avengers. Superheroes are ruling cinemas, but this was us going back to like a much more exciting, meaty
Yeah.
time. And I think when you look at even to that point, Bad Boys for Life and Bad Boys Ride or Die, you see these people who are excited for like that 90s not even nostalgia pool of it, but like that 90s action vibe. And
Yes.
these movies have that in
Yeah.
spades.
I love the fact that you brought up The Raid. I think that's part of it because The Raid was a success, like especially among the cinephile action people, like not as much in like the mainstream. I think, if I remember, like, I
Right.
feel like it wasn't like it was still kind of niche, but it influenced the
Definitely.
idea of what it could be. And John Wick kind of took that and like made that mainstream towards like mainstream viewing in America here. And it owes a little bit to that, but also it's just like we can do this too. This is what action should be. They're looking, going, this is the Raid doing. That's what action should be. Not what we've been doing for the past like 10 years or so. I'm sure there's been okay action movies, of course. The Bourne franchise were great movies overall. I don't love the Shaky Cam either, but Bourne Identity is one of my favorite action movies of the 2000s. All the first three were actually phenomenal. Even four is fun. I
Yeah,
think four is
I
underrated.
like the first four overall.
I think four is underrated. Absolutely. I mean, the first three are like excellent. Fourth one,
Yes.
so good, solid. Fifth one, well,
And the less we talk about the fifth one, the better.
but that's okay. You're doomed to have something eventually. But it just feels like this took it on, like it took like a sleeping genre, really, and like really made it rise and wake up and become something like that. It was talked about. It became like a cultural phenomenon in ways that it's hard to even describe unless you're there. I mean, it still is today to a degree. I mean, we have the John Wick series coming out. We got the ballerina spinoff coming, so it's definitely still there today. John Wick 4 was a huge success overall. But man, the
Overall,
original
dude,
John
that
Wick.
movie made stupid money. That
Yeah,
movie was hugely successful.
which is
Like,
why we're gonna get a
so I was
5 no
actually
matter
gonna
what.
bring up, it's funny because this movie, when it opened, just for context, because I really didn't talk about this up top like I normally do. This movie was made for, they say, about 20 to 30 million. I
Yeah.
always thought it was a little less than the 20, to be honest, the way that they've always talked about it. It made $86 million at the box office. That is
Right.
incredible for
Mhm.
what it was at the time, for what it was doing. In comparison, John Wick 4 made $440 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
$440 million at the box office.
They just kept going up. The next one, John Wick 2, 174 million, all of a sudden that much. John Wick 3, 327 million, just keeps going up. It's why,
Yeah.
like, even though John Wick 4, again, spoiler for that, like, it had a very solid ending. I would not be surprised if we don't back up the money tracks and figure out a way to make a 5 work. Hopefully, they get a good story to go with it and don't just do it for the money. But it's hard to walk away from that kind of success.
Well, and I think that's why, in that regard, they've started talking about these spin-off movies and TV shows instead. It really seems like Keanu and Chad are trying to find ways that allow them to continue the story in the franchise without being the ones that are front and center.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that's actually a good thing. I think it's smart for them to make a play to try to do something that allows the world to continue and these characters to continue without them necessarily having to be front and center,
Well, the
you
great thing
know?
about the lore that it's developed over the past couple of movies is that this world is set up for those kind of movies. Like a franchise isn't always like a lot of times a franchise will try to do a spin-off and it's like, why? That like it's usually from a spin-off of a popular sidekick type character, but they're not the characters you can make they can't lead their own movie and make it successful. It never works out that way. Even Hobbs and Shaw is an example. I mean, it made money, but like at the same time, didn't feel as successful the rest of the Furious franchise. And I
Right.
actually liked Hobbs and Shaw. I enjoyed that movie. But
I did too.
the sidekick of this film is not any one character. It's the lore. It's the lore itself. I mean, like Ballerina coming out next year, which is obviously we just talked about it before. We're gonna have to do a one-off episode for Ballerina when it comes out. Um, but Anna de Armas, who again I love as well, by the way. But you look at the
Yep.
cast; it's Lance Reddick getting to make his, I think, probably his final performance. I'm getting because I know that's in the can.
Yeah.
But Ian McShane is coming back for that one. You got Angelica Houston
Keanu's
who
in
was
it
in the
too.
film. Keanu makes an appearance in it as well. And it's like, oh, okay, so it's really the world that is the draw, and you can make that successful because of that, I think.
Well, and that's why this sequel series that was announced last week, that's gonna be, I'm assuming, either an FX show or like a streaming show. But the thing that I'm very excited about is it's a sequel to John Wick 4 about the fallout of what happens at the end of that
Right.
movie. Again, we'll get into that later, but it's going to be about the other characters and about the rest of the world and not specifically about John. And that is absolutely the route to go, because we need to flesh this world allows you to do that. And I think it also takes the pressure off of them having to make successful movies every time, because you can do a
100%.
lot more in a TV show with a lot of actors and do something that doesn't necessarily require the box office to also be there, right?
Absolutely. And because it's so
So
successful, it can handle it, and it's like a good thing. Of course, another franchise that could have handled it and handled it better if it wasn't for whatever behind the scenes. You know what I'm talking about here. Wrecker Ferguson and Mission Impossible. Man, that would have been a great spin-off series too, and that could have worked. But I digress.
I don't even want to get into that. I don't even. I have my feelings about how that went, and I'm still angry about it.
Yes, angry.
I still remember leaning over to my buddy Kyle and going,
"What are we doing?
They didn't just do that, right? Like that didn't just happen." I remember being just deflated in the moment. But anyway, I digress. One of the things too, I think that this movie really gets and is not talked about enough is the humor. And specifically the fact that I'm not even talking like in the dialogue, because there is a very specific amount of like black humor in the movie that I really love. It feels very Shane Blacky in that regard, in a lot of the ways that characters interact and talk to each other, in just the simple ways. You were talking about it earlier, the noise complaint, like all of that type of stuff. There's a lot of that throughout the movie that really works.
Right.
And it's really great. But honestly, the best for me is when he walks into the church and immediately just starts capping everyone, and the priest starts swearing at him in Russian. And like, it's one of those just like darkly humorous moments.
Yeah.
It also really makes you go, why the fuck is he killing people in a church? And you realize that it's actually a front, and it's such a great play on what we look at organized religion as.
True.
Chef's kiss. So I love that. But what I also think goes underlooked in all these is that there's a sense of like Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton physical comedy and humor to a lot of how the John character is portrayed. Not in like the way he moves and talks and things, but more just in a way of like, oh, he falls down a lot, and there's like comedy in some of the things that happen. And I kind of love that, because that is a really great trope of the everyman hero. And one who's also been out of the game for a little bit, but it's one of those things that you look at. I talked about this a ton while we were covering the Indiana Jones movies. Is part of the reason that people love that character is because he feels like a guy who is in the wrong place at the wrong time, who is just kind of screwed up along the way, and is lucky to get where he is alive, because he's always like just out of his depth in some capacity.
He gets a lot of luck involved.
He's very lucky, and I think that they do that a lot in these. Especially by the time we get to the fourth one, it's played up even more. But you kind of see it throughout the movies, and I've always liked that. It always worked for me.
Yeah, I know. I fully agree. The whole aspect of physical comedy is completely on board. Even in like some of the action beats, like they're almost like they're not funny, but they're still fun. They're meant to be funny, but they're still amusing. I like the idea when he does the foot shot in order to draw the guy out to get the real shot in. They make a point of like exchanging their clips. They run through dance things, and they're kind of, everything about it is just kind of like these fun little bits. The whole sequence between which, oh god, I can't remember her name. What is her name?
Adrian Padalecki.
Yes, Adrian Padalecki. That's her, Padalecki. And like her with the other assassin, as the one he pays there to hold on to her. The comedy that they go on, they start talking about. They had this whole sequence. And he calls him like, Lance Reddick calls him up. He's like, getting a lot of noise complaints about that. He's like, what's going on, kind of thing. He basically tells him that he's got an uninvited guest, but he says it's like so calmly and so matter of factly. The whole world, I think that's what sells this whole lore is the fact that everything is done so matter of fact, like this happens every day, and that's the difference. Like to us, this is like out there. Holy shit! This is batshit crazy. All this stuff, but to them, everyday occurrence at this point, and it's so fun to watch that.
It's one of those things that I think that I really love as the movies go on is that you realize that this version of the world, this is an everyday occurrence, no matter where you are. Like, again, your mileage may vary, of course, in how far they take it with some of the
Right.
sequences and where they take place. But I kind of always love that because this is a world that's kind of just chock full of these things. And I love it as like a weird alt universe. You know what I'm
Right,
saying?
right.
Like, clearly, we don't have that happening here. What? Sure.
Sure.
Uh-huh. And you look at it, and I kind of dig that because ultimately, this movie does a great job of convincing me that this world exists and it is real, and these
Yes.
characters are real, and I love that.
Okay, these type of movies are done all the time. Not all the time, but there's a lot of movies out there with the hidden secret world, that no one knows about, that's going on right underneath our nose, the secret societies. I mean,
Glass.
hell, Harry Potter, hell, like
Yeah.
Dresden Files books, and everything. That's what it's like. It's the same type of situation, but because to them it's every day, to us it's not. To them, they're going to treat it like it's every day. And that's what makes it magical. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it's like, okay, that's ridiculous. But sometimes it's ridiculous enough, but you don't care that it's ridiculous because it's done so well. And this is one of those times where, like, I want to know more about this Lord. What else? What else is going on here? Give me all of it. I guess again, I held back a little bit on the further. Like one of the reasons why I have again, when I say a problem with the other sequels, I love them and I still rate them very high as I watch them. But I watch something that's kind of like you have to surrender to it a little bit more than this one. Like so by the end, it's like okay, so basically, who's not an assassin by the time like John Wick 4 rolls around? Like everybody, the whole world is like it becomes like less of a secret world. It becomes like our world is the secret world at this point, and that's what loses me just a little bit, which is why I kind of prefer this. This has that great balance where this is the secret world still amongst the many real world Denzians, so to speak. It's such a perfect movie, man. It's such a perfect
One of
movie.
the things too that I really just appreciate overall is that it never it never asks too much of the audience this first time out. And I
Yes.
think that that is ultimately because the movie really does hinge on the fact that at the beginning of the movie, we watch his wife die. We see it happens. The funeral happens, and she gets him that dog. That's
Yeah.
her last gift to him is the dog. And so when they ransack the house and kill the dog, it doesn't matter what else happens in this movie. The brilliance of this is that the moment that that dog is killed,
You
you are
all in.
100% behind John Wick. It
100%.
doesn't matter because it was a puppy.
Like
It's not even just a dog, it's a puppy.
you could watch all the people getting killed in the world in every action movie, but then you touch that dog, fuck you. John Wick deserves all the justice at this point. And it's true. Everybody gets behind you. You get everybody steps forward or inches forward to their seat and goes, okay, John, you better get some fucking vengeance for that dog.
Right. And that's the funniest thing about the fact that there are now 4 of these is
Mhm.
that all of this is basically born out of if one dude hadn't killed his dog and stolen his car, this never would have happened.
He would have retired and been not happy, but happy enough because he would have gotten there with the puppy, you feel like. Um, well, happy enough. Because I do go back to the bar sequence, and it is quite clear that he is happier in this world, even if he doesn't want to admit it. I think he was happier with the
And
wife. He was willing to go. He was willing to leave it with the wife. Then, like, there's something about this world that he's addicted to a little bit.
well, he's addicted to it because he's good at it. It doesn't mean he
Right.
likes it. It just means that this is where he is him the most, right?
Right.
And he even says like he didn't deserve the life that he had outside of that. Like it was a better life than he deserved, are his exact words. And you kind of do believe it. You really do believe
Right.
that he believes that he was only that guy.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I kind of love that the movie doesn't really try to say otherwise. I think that it does a great job of pulling him back in, and eventually you do go, Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back because once he remembers what it was like, and I mean, you can't put the genie back in the bottle once you've pulled the cork out, right?
Absolutely. It's all building to
So
that moment, though, like you said. That's what it is. It's like because you know he was happy because they do a good job. It's definitely a slow burn at first with the character. With the we meet him, we see actually we have the common trope. Obviously, we begin at the end, and then we flash back. But you see John Wick. You see him kind of sad. You're not entirely sure why. You see him with the photograph. You see him with the video of the wife. You're like, okay, so something happened to the wife. You see the dog come. You see him kind of. It's a very slow burn considering how fast paced this movie is. The beginning is a very slow burn, but it works to establish where he was and the puppy coming to where he could get to until Theon, little Alveolan, Theon bitch, whoever comes in and fucks it up. But then it all builds from that moment into that screaming line where it's probably the most famous line in the show, in the movie, I think. The whole, yeah, everybody keeps asking if I'm back. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back. And it's like, that's who he is. He's given into his baser desires. He's given into his Baba Yaga-ness. And we're all like, not happy because you want to see John Wick be happy, but it's good for the audience to see him being back and in full flow.
it is, and I think again, like this movie makes such a great argument for us just watching the characters kind of descent into the darkness that was always there. And again, to really put it the way they do, where it's basically, hey, they killed his dog, you kind of get a joy out of it. Like,
Yeah.
it's actually very it's gonna sound really bad the way I say this, I think. So don't really take it that way, but there is some sort of like wish fulfillment, right?
Sure.
In watching this in like you play a video game. Like when you
Yeah.
play a Bond game and you feel like a sense of joy in like capping bad guys.
Yes.
And you kind of get that watching this because again, it's the dog of it all. It
Yeah.
is. It is the dog of it all. If the dog is not unfortunately killed at the beginning of the movie, none of us want to see the dog die. None of us are happy about that. But
It's
the
a risk.
bloodshed that follows for
Yeah.
2 hours, that's what
Jesus.
we're here for. It's a risk and it pays off. It
It's a
works.
big risk because there's a lot of people who go like, there's a lot, I know people out there who like, there's violence against a dog. I'm not watching. I can't watch. And I understand that. So like doing that at the beginning is a very calculated risk, but it does serve, like I said, to unite. Then if you make it through that, you're united and you want to see John Wick just fucking rain hellfire down on everybody involved.
It's
And
brilliant and it's beautiful. And again, I mean, I think because the characters all feel so well fleshed out throughout, and you also know that they all kind of have a history with him, it actually makes it that much more harrowing a lot of the
yeah,
time. And it really kind of actually paints a very different picture of this is his past. He's now destroying all of his past because they've pulled him out of the darkness. How far is he willing to go?
right, right.
Because, even McShane, when he sees him for the first time in the Continental, when he comes back, he goes, "Are you sure you wanna do this? Like, you got out. If you come
Yeah,
back in
once
here, there's no going back."
And that's what ends up fueling the sequels, really, in a way. That's what they have those moments where, like, that becomes a big part of, like, John Wick 2. Like, you were out, and I was gonna let you be out, but you came back, so now you are back. Once you're back, you're back. I will say one of the best things they could have done was be understated in one aspect, and you don't expect it, but it's kinda like if you ever watch Star Wars Rebels, and maybe a spoiler for here, so give me a pause here. The final duel between Obi-Wan and Darth Maul, returning Darth
Mhm.
Maul, which some people, like, didn't like. I loved because it was so samurai and so, like, but very quick. Same thing kinda happens here. Like, we're building up. We wanna kill Theon so badly, and you expect John to, like, torture him, to make this a long, drawn out death, to make him really earn, like, just, like, earn that justice, right? He comes up and Theon's like, "No, I got it. Boom, done." Not even, like, thinking about it. Just one shot, tap on, I'm done. It's
Yeah.
so and it's so effective. It's surprisingly effective because I was in that way too. I was like, "Oh, let's see this guy suffer. Let's see this little bitch suffer. But then when he did that, I'm kind of like, that's John Wick. John Wick don't give a
Yeah.
fuck about that. He's just like he's efficient and you're done. Boom.
You know what I really love about this though too is that this movie does a great job of also establishing that this world is not chaotic. There are rules. There are things that you must abide by to be a part of this and like involved in it, right? And that whole
Right.
idea that when you're on the continental ground, you're really not supposed to be violent. You're not like there's all these rules and regulations in the ways that things are handled, and it actually adds a lot to the movie because you realize that this is a structured job. Honestly, you know what I mean? Like they actually have codes and ethics. It's actually all very medieval nighty in a really cool
Right.
way. Or even Japanese Ronin, right? That sort of thing too. There's a lot of influences that are all kind of pushed into it, but it really fleshes out the idea that if you're doing this, you're actually kind of doing it almost nobly of your own. Like you're doing it because you feel this drive to do it, and you're also kind of a badass for it because
Right.
you're not going to go after your fellow assassins. You don't, it doesn't matter who you are in these rooms. You may not get along, but there's a real sense of like just that almost begrudging respect.
Right.
That's the best way to describe it. And I really
Right.
love that, or earnest scaredness, depending on who
Right.
you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So many more things. I want to talk briefly about Michael Nyquist. I love how he is so. I mentioned this before. Kind of want to get a little bit more into it. He's so like understated in the beginning, and like he gets so maniacal towards the end. Like so, not maniacal like in an evil way. Like he goes like almost insane. Like with like
There's a descent into madness for him.
Yes, very much so. By the end, one of my favorite bits is at the end. He's in the car trying to get to the helicopter, and John Wick shows up, and all of a sudden he's just like laughing. He's like laughing at them, like he's like, ah. Like,
Yeah.
what now? He starts like kind of give the guy a gun. He got it's like it makes like it almost makes no sense, but it makes perfect sense the same way. This is a guy who just doesn't understand like what's going on. He's a guy who's used to getting what he wants when he wants it. He is this like mafioso kingpin kind of guy, and he's getting effed over every which way and can't deal with it. It's such a great descent into madness, as you well put it. Wonderful job.
Yeah, it's really great. And honestly, again, he's such a great character. He makes that phone call where he tells John, thank you for at least making my son's death swift.
Right. Right.
And
yes.
Yet at the same time, when he makes that call, he also realizes he's making this call and he's just putting a bigger target on his back now because he's also kidnapped Marcus.
Yeah.
And I've always appreciated that.
Yes.
Because it's a great moment where he crosses that line too.
Right.
And he knows he's doing it and he knows he's going to die. It doesn't matter that he doesn't do it trying to save himself.
Right.
He does it knowing that no matter what comes next, this is it. And that's why that moment works, because when he gets that like nervous, just like crazy maniacal descent at the end, it's because he kind of just did it to himself.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I will say there's one thing, like if I had a nitpick about this film, and it's a very small nitpick, but it does bother me every time I watch the movie. Nyquist gets John Wick under control or whatever, and he's like yelling at him at the church, whatever. And this is right after the famous line.
Yeah,
they got to kill John Wick. They got to kill John Wick, and what do? They don't do what they show John Wick doing. John Wick doing the quick tap. Instead, they go to the suffocation route. Why are you bothering? Like it gives the reason is because we can't kill John Wick, and because we need to give Marcus time to intervene, I guess, in a way. But it always kind of feels like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, that's one of those typical bad guy things in the same way that, the Bond villains always spend too much time talking. It's the same sort of just basic, why would you do that? But they're villains. We just, wow, why?
Yeah.
Um, you know who else is really good in this that we don't talk enough about is Dean Winters, as Vigo's
Yeah.
attorney. He adds a lot of comedy to the bits, but he's one of those guys that you put him into a movie, and again, he just kind of has that presence about him that adds to the character and the world in an interesting way. And I just love in English, Vigo, please,
All the time.
Vigo, in fucking English.
Cocksucker.
Yeah, it just getting so irritated, and he just never quite knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And I kind of love that because he actually kind of represents the audience.
Yeah.
We're all kind of in it together, and we're all kind of laughing nervously, but it's also like, what is happening? How did we get here? Now I'm stuck in the middle of this, and I didn't ask to be here. Like I'm just working for these guys.
Right. It's so funny. It's a great underrated bit. Absolutely, it's one of those things where I don't really know him from too many other things. Dean Witter, I know he's been in he's one of those guys in a way. I know he's in
He was
30 Rock, Rescue.
Yeah, he was in 30 Rock. He did a little bit of like Law and Order and things like that. He was in Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
He's probably more famous for his Mayhem commercials than anything else, probably, honestly. Which I love. I do actually like those commercials. So, but he also, and like without being one of those guys like a John Leguizamo or Ian McShane, he still ends up being one of those guys that you can lean on to have a fun moment from. And John Wick is just full of them. That's what makes it so great.
The thing I know him mostly from, though, for me, and actually it's funny because this is one of those things that I'm sure we will cover the movies eventually, but he was one of the main characters in Terminator: The Sarah Connor Chronicles.
That's right. He
And
was,
he's
wasn't he?
excellent in that show because he's the one who's kind of chasing the story of everything going on,
Yeah.
while the Terminators are like doing their attacks and everything.
Right.
He's excellent in that show.
I forgot about that. To be honest with you, I did forget about that.
Most people do because it lasted 2 seasons. And that's such a bummer. One thing too, I have to say about this movie in particular, and this franchise as a whole, is how beautiful it is. This one is a lot less neon lighty than they continue to get, in like bold colors as 3 and 4, even 2, honestly. But there's it's really easy to make New York feel seedy, but they actually don't do that. New York is vibrant and beautiful, but in like darker hues. In all the sequences, you never feel like New York is like gringy and like dirty in like a grungy type of look. No, it's actually like shockingly still beautiful. Yeah, it's a little like the blue twilight hue almost of like, it's kind of invokes a sadness, but you're never like, oh, it's a sad, dirty, evil New York. It's the beautiful New York.
Right.
It's the one that also can allow for us to have a nightlife and all these things, but it feels so on the outside of it, whereas as the movies go, you're much more clearly in different parts of New York.
Right, absolutely. And I will say they choose their shots wisely in this film. A lot of great architecture in there, a lot of great building choices. And even inside and outside for sure. I love the Continental, how it looks. I love the idea of everything with Continental. And I'm very not surprised that Ian McShane got bumped up so much more in the next 3 because his character is so great. I'm actually not surprised at all. In fact, it was a perfect thing to do. Like, I know we talked about it off air. I think we mentioned it on air, but they did do the Continental spin-off movies or miniseries.
Yeah, I mean, they're all 90-minute episodes, basically.
Right. And I know I actually never even watched it. I know you didn't. We're not too thrilled with them. Wasn't made by the same people, obviously, which is what I found out later on, which is why I haven't watched them. So it's not really canon. I mean, it's technically whatever, but you know what I mean? It's like you can question whether it's canon or not really. But that aside, I completely understand why you would make that series.
Like
having the Continental as like a setting ground with Ian McShane's character, a young Ian McShane's character, that's a brilliant way to go. I'm sorry to hear it didn't work out that well. Maybe put the right people behind it, that'd be a different story. But yeah, I would love to see that because it's just a great setting. Which is why they do this all throughout John Wick, like the church, Angelica Houston's ballet school church. That's like a great setting. the whole
Yeah.
film, almost a set of good settings, and they pick and choose vibrant pieces of settings to make it work well. Um,
Well, and there's a weird vibe almost that's very Stephen Moffat-y to me in the regards of looking at things that are just everyday things and finding a way to almost turn it into a sinister underbelly that you didn't really expect, like
right,
the ballerinas, like the church. There's a way of taking a lot of those little things and finding a way to almost be like, "Oh, wait, so underneath all of this, there's actually something, like, more sinister going on? That's interesting." You know
right,
what I
right,
mean? And even a hotel, right? Like the
right.
Continental being this larger than life actual spy or a assassin organization is so much more interesting
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
makes it everyday thing feel more alive in a way that you
100%.
never anticipated. And I really love that.
Yeah,
And
me
I
too.
do think that it's a mistake that the Continental TV show was also a prequel. Frankly
Yeah.
speaking, I don't think the Continental needed a prequel. I think what the Continental needed was to just be a show set in the same time frame.
I push back a little bit on that, like only
You
to
didn't
that.
watch it.
No, I know. I'm saying I push back on like the idea because the idea of a younger Ian McShane does interest me, like how he
Oh,
came to be
sure.
where he is. So that aspect of it works for me. Maybe that's not exactly what they did end up doing. The prequel is more prequel of the Continental itself, which I get. Um, that I agree. We don't need a prequel for the Continental. A prequel for John, like a younger Lance Reddick, a younger Ian McShane. That's kind of
Yeah.
cool to me. So I like that idea. But you're right. I think if we did a Continental, you should have done get fucking Ian McShane. Make it be a
Yes.
current day with Ian McShane is a much better and stronger idea for sure. For sure.
Well, and you could have like in that show, you could have just as easily also done episodes that dealt with how he became that guy in the
Right.
same regard, right? Like a TV show allows that. Actually, a movie also allows that if you do it the right way.
Yeah.
The Godfather 2 is famous for the fact that it is told in two very different settings and
Yes.
time periods. You
Yep.
can absolutely do that if it's done correctly. It's just about how you handle it. And I think that the Continental just didn't handle it the way that I would have been happy with. And again, it just goes to also that it was made by not the creatives.
Right.
There's a reason that the new show is going to be Stahelski directing the pilot and producing and overseeing the scripts, and Keanu's also producing. Like they're making it a point that this is their franchise and it does not just belong to Lionsgate. It is their series.
Yeah.
And I
100%.
think that's much better. Um, One of the things that's really interesting about this movie actually is that it does what Rogue Nation does. And I
Okay.
think that that's what makes it really neat to me is that the movie escalates very, very heavily throughout and then de-escalates for the third act in the right way.
Yes. I agree with that.
It goes for very big action beats in the middle of the movie to then take the finale and make it a much smaller, personal, like conclusion. And I think that's so much more interesting for the character in the world than almost anything else. Not to throw shade at the other movies. I love what they do as it goes on, but there's something about the fact that this movie ends on a dock in the rain with like a
Right.
fist fight instead of like this big banging shoot 'em up type of thing. Like it becomes very personal, and it
Mhm.
because of that, it feels oddly intimate.
Which is again another reason why I think I do overall. And we're gonna find out because I'm watching all the films. I do prefer this one in a way because the other ones they start to feel too video gamey to me a little bit. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna beat this guy. Got to go to the next boss. Got to go to the next boss. Got to go to the next boss. Got to go to the next, and it ends up with this big thing. This one, even though Michael Nyqvist is the big boss to a degree, it lets the film. The bathhouse is definitely the big action sequence, I think, because that's probably the
Yes.
biggest action sequence, and it's great. It's a fun, totally fun action sequence, but it gets to have that kind of personal battle with Nyquist at the end, where it's just him, and they actually have more conversation than they even do fist fights at times. They're actually just kind of talking it out almost before they eventually have to, do what they have to do. It lets the film end how it begins, intimate John Wick character moments, so that we get to end
Yeah.
with John Wick falling out of the car, going to get the new puppy. They got to know where he gets a new puppy. Um, it's a rebirth, and it ends on a beautiful note that way. And I think it's the only one that does it that way. Well, I guess you could say the fourth one does to a degree.
I think you can argue the third one in some capacity too. It's a little more complicated, but
Right.
I think you can argue for it in that one in the same regard. But
Could.
that one's also like very oddly open ended
Right.
for obvious reason.
Right.
Versus this one, and again, to your point, that's what makes this movie the movie that started it, and the movie that, because if you never made another John Wick, you could be just satisfied with the ending of this.
100%. This is a self-contained movie, and it is a brilliantly self-contained movie. And if we didn't have any more, it would still be looked on as a great 20 teens action movie, probably the seminal 2010s action movie.
At
2, 3,
least
and
from
4.
American standpoints, I
Right,
would say
right.
absolutely.
Absolutely. The 20, and of course, the sequels do their own thing and they bring up the lore, and it's still a great old time and a fun old time. I have no problem with that. And you're right, they do end up ending in more vague, open ways because they knew there was going to be more. The first one, they didn't
Yeah.
know there was going to be more. I mean, there's always ways you can
There
get
was the
through.
hope.
There was the hope.
Yeah.
They laid a little bit of the groundwork with the once you step back in, you're in. That's kind of laying a little bit of groundwork, but not quite as specifically as like, ending with, okay, now everybody's going to assassinate you, or now you're getting thrown off the top of a building, or like all
Right.
sorts of other possible things that could go on. This ends definitively as this is it. This is it. So,
And I think that's ultimately what makes it so special. And
Agreed.
I do understand your argument. Every time we've talked about it, I've never thought you were really crazy for it. Like, I like to give you a hard time just because we're friends. I like to,
We
poke
got
at
each
you a
other all
little
the
bit.
time.
But
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, but like the truth of the matter is I 100% see why you feel that way, and I don't think that it's actually inaccurate at all. I think that there's some truth to exactly how you're talking about it. There is something that makes this one comparatively very special because it does feel like lightning in a bottle. It does feel very contained. It feels very like its own movie. And honestly, like that's a good thing. I think in the current landscape that we're in, and because you and I grew up on action movies from the 80s and 90s, because we're both old enough to have lived through most of that, and then also to have lived through where we are now, where it feels like everyone is so stuck in their franchise ways of, it seems like when people go to the movies, they're more interested in what comes next, even though they're watching the current movie. Like, I think it's kind of broken people's brains because I think that they aren't able to look at things as self-contained anymore. And it is kind of Marvel's fault in some capacity. I don't blame them, but the truth of the matter is in the expansion of the Marvel universe as it's moved forward, it has started to rely on a lot of, we're going to wink at what's next within the movies, and it makes people more focused on what's coming than the thing that they just watched.
Yeah.
And so in John Wick, they kind of do that also, right? As you move forward, not in a like, not quite in the same regard, but because they're so much more open ended, the more that we move on, the more that it's clear that it's a serialized story versus this original one where you never had the option of knowing that there was going to be a sequel.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
it does change the way that you interact with them as they go.
You have to change if you want to like them because
Right.
because you have to accept them, accept what it's going. And like I said, you mentioned it before. We've had our little joking tiffs about it because we've had this conversation before. And likewise, when you say that, you give me shit about it, like you understand, I completely understand why you love 4 so much and 3 so much, like the whole big over the top type aspect to it because it's so just brilliantly chaotic and fun and
Yes.
absolutely, and I get that.
It feels like the world has now exploded, right? Like, and we'll get to all of it, obviously, but because we're talking about this one, it's really interesting. Every time I go back to it, I kind of look at it and I'm a little bit in awe that such a cool, self-contained action thriller was kind of made on their own, almost guerrilla style, I would call it. Like, not really, but the fact that it wasn't made by a major studio, the fact that it was kind of done as a love letter. Remember, at one point, it was called Scorn, and it sounded like it was going to go direct to video. Like, that's where this movie was living in its limbo for the longest time. There was people who really did not believe that this would ever work.
Right.
And now you look at it, it's like, God damn.
It did. It's an original IP also. That's something that, like, I mean, that at the time, I mean, John Wick is huge. Now, back then, no one had any idea what this was. No one had no name behind it. Keanu Reeves, again, was not a star. Chad Stahelski was a stunt double for Keanu for The Matrix. I mean, these guys are all pretty much like unknowns. I'm actually very impressed that they got the character actors that they got to be able to play this. Like,
and that was 100% on the goodwill of like it being Keanu.
Yeah,
honestly,
100%,
you know,
absolutely.
And you know what's so funny too? I'm now realizing this and this was not intentional, but I'm actually glad that we waited. You know that we're doing this almost to the exact 10th anniversary?
No.
It actually worked out that we ended up pushing it because this opened the October of 2014.
Yeah.
The very first podcast review that I ever did for anything was for the original John Wick.
Oh, wow. This is
so funny to like come back around to it. And I'll have to see if I can find the original audio with my buddy Sam when we were doing stuff back in the day, because I think that we had a lot of fun talking about it then. And you know, it's a very different time to be like 10 years ago looking back and seeing what it's become, because look how far we've come.
I mean, I just want to say it's contagious. It's contagious. This is the kind of film that is contagious to talk about. So I don't doubt you had a blast talking about it, because it's easy to talk about. It's easy to fun. Like I said, I barely took any notes because I don't need notes to remember anything. I can riff off the top of my head on this stuff and go, this is great stuff. I'm sorry, I interrupted you though. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I mean, to your point, and you always interrupt me. I interrupt you too. It's what we do here. We're very good at that. But one of the things that I really can't underscore or undersell here is, again, no one bet on this movie, really. Like, Summit eventually released it, but this was really a risky thing. And now look, sequels, spin-off TV shows, spin-off movies on the way, comic books, video games, like t-shirts, probably theme park attractions in the future. I think that there is like an actual theme park or there was a like actual experience as John Wick 4 was coming out and Continental was coming out. Like this thing is so massive now. It is like $1 billion franchise off of a movie that no one was betting on.
Right. 100%. 100%.
No one. And that to me, that to me is what makes it special and continues to make it stand out. And you go back and watch it, and it is amazing that such a small, simplistic tale of vengeance can be something that is so large now on a global scale that we're getting like major talent from across the globe to be in these movies. And these movies are now not just New York based. Like, we are shooting these across the world, in Hong Kong, in like the Sahara Desert. Like, they're taking this all over the place. They shot them in Europe and in Rome. Like, are you kidding me? Look at what it's become.
It's become amazing in 10 years time to go from almost direct to video to where we are now. Like, probably one of the premier franchises in the world today. I mean,
easily.
Action-wise, the only thing that's higher, maybe Mission Impossible.
But even then, it depends on what kind of action you're looking for.
Yeah,
because you know, these movies are a lot less about the death-defying stunts and much more about
the choreographed
violence. Yeah, you know, the Mission Impossible movies really aren't that, and that's not a bad thing. That's not a dig or anything. They're just that is not the movies that they are made to be. Those movies are made to be the Tom Cruise is going to potentially die making this, and that's what it is.
Right.
That's fine. If Tom Cruise wants to die on a plane, Tom Cruise wants to die on a plane.
Right.
Let it happen. Like, let that man do what he wants to do. But these movies are made to really harken back to the partial Lethal Weapon, Die Hard, 80s action riffs, but also mixing in a lot of, let's get the Jackie Chans of the world, the Jet Li movies of the world, the Donnie Yen movies of the world, put them in a blender, and like, let's watch the ballet of violence unfold in front of us, because Yeah, a ballet of violence. That's what it is.
Absolutely. I say that with love. I wasn't
Yeah.
making funny at all. It's exactly what
Oh,
it
I
is.
know. It that is what it is, and I love it for that. And honestly, I'll say this: Chad Stahelski gets a pass for life, as
Yeah,
far as I'm concerned, for what he has done with these 4 movies.
100%. And like David Leitch is also that's how he's become such a name, getting to direct all these films recently. I'm not the hugest fan of David Leitch's solo directorial efforts, to be honest with you. I'm
Me
not going to
either.
let it lie. Some are better than others. I did like The Fall Guy. I love The Fall Guy, honestly. Some other films, yeah, here and there, but he gets a pass for like I'll always watch his movies for sure because I appreciate what he did as well. And if the Academy Award ever gets made for stunts, it's mainly started here. It started here.
Yeah, it's so interesting too because, like, you look at what this ended up becoming, and also all the kind of riffs and knockoffs that we've had since. I mean, down to Derek Kolstad, who wrote the first 3 of these, he actually also wrote Nobody, which is now getting its own sequel, but Nobody is written to almost feel like the same world. Like, the whole kind of man on a mission thing started to become real popular again because John Wick was such a success.
Yeah.
And while no one is quite like Violent Night with David Harbour
Yes.
is 100% made to feel like a John Wick version of Santa Claus.
Absolutely.
This
Absolutely.
is now a thing. This
Yeah.
is when people make movies, they do the thing that when The Dark Knight was real popular and they started rebooting things, there was a lot of we want to Dark Knight the franchise.
Yeah.
So RoboCop would be the Dark Knighted reboot, right? They tried to do
Absolutely.
those type of things. That's how Hollywood operates. People try to John Wick shit now all the time.
Absolutely. Nobody.
No,
Which
huh?
actually talk about doing Atomic Blonde, which obviously was David Leitch. And I actually
Yep.
enjoyed Atomic Blonde for what it is. I don't like it as much as the others, but it's still a good film. So many movies have really gone to do that, and it's not a surprise because when you get a successful film like that, you get your knockoffs, and some of them are good, some of them are bad. I mean, hell, you can even say Extraction is one of those to a degree, and that's fine. That's fair enough.
100%.
Yeah. So it ends
It's
up
just
doing
so interesting.
it is very interesting. It's become its own kind of genre in a way now, and good for them. Good for them for doing it because they have earned it with what they did. They definitely earned it with what they did for sure. Um, and I got to be honest, I don't think Matrix gets made without Keanu Reeves, without John
Oh,
Wick.
no, you mean the new one?
The fourth one,
Absolutely
yeah, the
not.
fourth one.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't think that happens. I think that we also need to put just respect on the name of Keanu Reeves after this because
yeah,
like Bill and Ted 3 also does not happen if John
right,
Wick is not successful. Like
100%.
that movie 100% only happens because Keanu has the leverage to make it happen now.
Yeah,
Like you look at the stuff that he is the coolest, man. I love Keanu Reeves. He is just that guy. I
yeah,
love him so much. And I love what he's become. I love that he's really built this life for himself where he's worked at finding ways to give back to other artists that
right,
or other people who help build his career. And that's what is so cool about this is that when you look at where Stahelski started in the like they knew each other because of the Matrix. Because Stahelski was the dude who was doing all the martial arts work for them in the movie, and he was the stunt coordinator.
yeah,
Then
absolutely.
he graduates to directing because Keanu takes a chance,
Yes, good for and
and
good.
that's so cool.
It's that story. That's how you love to hear about people getting their chance when they pay their dues. Obviously, Chad Slesky did such a good job that he earned the shot in enough people's eyes. And when it happens, sometimes this is what you get out of it. Instead of like, there's always the studio way of wanting to rely on an old standby. And I understand that. You like, do I want Joe Schmo who I've never really worked with, or do I want somebody who I know has a track record of somebody who's had successful movies? You're almost always going to go for the track record. But you get somebody who gets you, get somebody to support you like this happened, you can get magic happening because it's a unique new view. Because whenever you get a standby guy to do it, you know what you're getting, but the audience also knows what you're getting. It's unlikely you're going to get anything very new, anything you're really excited by as far as like, oh, I haven't seen this before. It's, oh, I've seen this guy do A, X, Y, and Z, and it's in the style of that. I like it, so it's good. But this lets you try adding something new to the mix, and that's always a good thing for film.
Oh, 100%. And so, I think overall, my biggest takeaway more than anything is I'm not just happy that this movie happens, this movie exists the way that it does. I'm thrilled
Yeah.
that it not only took off and ended up being successful. I'm happy for everyone involved because it
Yeah.
felt like such a win for Keanu. It felt like a win for Chad Stahelski. It felt like a win for everybody involved. And it also felt like a win for the audience because the truth of the matter is as much as I like my cape shit, I was ready even in 2014 for new. I was
Yeah.
ready for something that would push us back to that kind of era of filmmaking that kind of felt lost because, even 4 years before that when the A-Team came out and the
Mhm.
Expendables came out, you were trying to capture that magic, but like audiences were not really showing up. The Expendables being the obvious exception because of the people in it, but the action movie thing really was falling by the wayside unless you were Liam Neeson. It really didn't feel like we were getting the same type of like 90s action thrillers that we needed. And
Right.
I'm so glad that it ended up kind of coming back around because of these. Yes, again, sometimes it feels like knockoff stuff, but at the same time, ultimately, as long as it's fun, I'm really not mad about it.
Yeah, same. Absolutely same. Yes. Well, anything else we have to say on this? I got my notes are all pretty exhausted. I pretty much said everything I wanted to say, I
I just
think.
hope that Kelly felt like the wait was worth this, and that I'm glad that she didn't have to wait nearly as long to hear us talk about John Wick as I've waited to see Chad Stahelski's Highlander.
Oh, yeah.
Highlander. Come on, my guy. Let's get it going. I've been waiting for your Highlander movie forever. For those who don't know, Chad Stahelski, who directed the 4 John Wick films, his next film is supposed to be Highlander. He's been working on it for what feels like almost a
Forever.
decade now.
Almost a decade,
It
yeah.
feels like it's been forever. And Henry Cavill is meant to be the lead. They said that they've been training and getting everything ready for it. He's hoping to do for Highlander what he did with John Wick. He wants to make sword fights as epic as they did with the gun fu stuff in this. He wants to really build the world out in a way that the franchise has always said that it should be, but has never like really dived into unless you watch the TV show. So I'm
Right.
really looking forward to what he's going to do with it because I think he has the right mind and handle to build a world out of Highlander. And I'm really looking forward to what he's doing. So, hey, Chad, we love you. We love you dearly. Get your shit together and let's get this movie made.
I will agree 100%.
Easy for me to say sitting in front of a microphone and staring into a camera, but still.
I will say I don't think we'll ever cover the Highlander franchise because the first film is the best one by far, and the rest are, well, they're there. They are films.
I still kind of love the third one, but boy, Highlander is a franchise that it exists.
It does exist. I don't hate the third one. That's about as far as I'll go, I think, on it.
Yeah, you know what? Funny enough, you know who's in the fourth one? Donnie Yen.
Donnie Yen, yeah, that's true.
A very young Donnie Yen does appear in Highlander Endgame, which is always kind of fun.
I will say, as much as I hate the movie, I always like seeing Michael Ironside, so I can watch 2 and at least see Michael Ironside.
And John C. McGinley.
Yes, that's true. That's very true. Very true.
Do you ever think about how Dave Bautista was once upon a time supposed to be the Kurgan in one of the remakes of Highlander and how good that would have been?
That would have been great. That would have been so great. So
There's
great.
no saying he still couldn't, but I just feel like the time has unfortunately passed. But man, he would have made it fantastic.
Oh,
Kurgan.
absolutely. 100% he would have been a fantastic Kurgan. Oh, it would have been great. Would have been great. All right. Then, so yeah, Kelly, I hope you enjoyed it as well. I hope everybody else enjoyed it as well. You'll come back next time in 2 weeks for John Wick Chapter 2. PJ, where can the folks find you?
You guys can find me on all the socials at PJ Campbell. Threads, Blue Sky, Twitter, because it is still Twitter. All those places, Instagram. Follow me for all of my nonsense and movie takes, basically, because that's really all I use social media for nowadays. But and hanging out here with this bozo.
This bozo, who you can find all over this channel, of course. At News you on Twitter. You can find me here every other week now, again, with two Mediocre White Dudes on Film. You can find me every other week with review with Lego, me and Lego going over the V franchise every week on Wednesday, doing Star Wars, Holy Snokes Star Wars podcast with my friend Matty Gunner. This week we're going to go all into the Star Wars news from D23. Then we got, of course, I do Crown Jewels every week with my Queen channel, which is a sister YouTube channel, has its own audio feed. We are on the album The Game, which is great. And finally, The One-Offs, which is a great show I've been doing there. We're our second episode going to air on August 20th. Myself and the mighty Mark Ellis talking about the mighty Van Halen. Lots of fun to be had for sure. And another thing I didn't say at the top, I should have: like, subscribe, all that stuff. Help us fight the algorithm. Leave comments, rate 5 stars, all that jazz. And if you can join the Patreon, it's a great time to do so. If not, completely understand. Just do your part, share it, like it, get us out there. You know, we love talking to you guys. And leave comments and let us know what you want us to talk about next. We're always open for suggestions. Of course, the patrons will get the patrons will get the obviously they get the first nod for sure. But we're always looking to have more conversation with you guys. So unless that's it, I think we can say adieu and see you next time, my friend.
I'm just glad that we're back. I hope you guys are glad we're back too, because it feels good.
Just feels good.
Adios.
Peace.